Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're diving straight into the mechanics of human behavior through the lens of the psychodynamic approach. We're going to break down the complex architecture of the mind to see exactly how our internal, hidden forces actually drive our everyday actions. Let's get right into it. So, have you ever been mid-sentence and just suddenly mispronounced a totally ordinary word? Or maybe you've woken up in a cold sweat trying to make sense of a dream involving, I don't know, a giant talking donut? Well, we usually brush those off as random glitches, right? But the source material points out that these common mishaps are actually clues. They're clues to something much, much deeper happening right beneath our awareness. Now, to actually map out these deep emotional conflicts and see how people deal with them, the clinical methodology had to evolve step by step. It's really fascinating. Early approaches actually used hypnosis to try and unlock these hidden parts of the mind. Then, the techniques moved into free association and ultimately into dream analysis. Each of these steps was a deliberate, calculated attempt to understand the really complex internal functioning of a mind that just couldn't be easily assessed through direct methods alone.
Okay, so to understand exactly how we process these conflicts, we kind of need to begin a spatial journey into the mind itself. The psychodynamic theory brilliantly visualizes the human mind as being split into three distinct levels of consciousness. Think of it like a deep ocean, or maybe a multi-level building. And where a thought or an emotion lives within these three levels, well, that fundamentally dictates how we behave and how we feel.
We're going to start our journey at the very surface, the conscious level. This includes all the thoughts, feelings, and actions you are actively aware of right now. Literally right this second. As you're watching this explainer, processing my words, taking in the information, you are using your conscious mind. It's the safe, visible surface of your mental life. But, as we all know, this is really just a tiny fraction of the whole picture.
So let's plunge one layer deeper into what is known as the preconscious. I want you to think of this layer as a sort of mental waiting room. The preconscious contains mental activity that you aren't actively thinking about right this second, but you could easily become aware of if you just attend to it closely. For instance, if I ask you what you had for dinner last night, you probably weren't thinking about it 2 seconds ago, but you can effortlessly retrieve that information and bring it right up into the conscious mind. It's stored, it's accessible, it's just not currently active.
And finally, we take the elevator all the way down to the deepest, darkest basement of the mind, the unconscious. According to the text, this includes mental activity that people are completely unaware of. And listen, this isn't just some dusty storage room, okay? It is an active, swirling reservoir of instinctive animal drives. It's where we store concealed ideas, hidden wishes, and fundamental drives that we just cannot easily see or access. A lot of these hidden elements arise from primitive desires, often sexual or aggressive, that simply can't be expressed openly in society. And because of that, they are repressed and locked away down here. Now, when we look at these two extremes side by side, the tension becomes pretty obvious. On one hand, we've got the conscious mind, the safe, known, logical surface where we live our day-to-day lives. And then on the other side, we have the unconscious, this chaotic, hidden basement filled with primitive drives, repressed desires, and concealed wishes. The psychodynamic approach tells us that our personality and our behaviors are largely the result of the tension between these two opposing forces. The conscious mind is desperately trying to maintain order, while the unconscious mind is constantly pushing for these primitive, hidden desires to be satisfied. Because of this intense tension, we find ourselves in a constant struggle. The text emphasizes that we are endlessly trying to find socially acceptable ways to express these unconscious impulses, or, to keep those impulses away from being expressed altogether. It's a highly relatable, everyday internal battle. A part of you has this primitive, animal drive that wants immediate gratification. But your conscious mind knows that society has rules and morals. We can't just act out on our base instincts. So we end up spending an incredible amount of psychological energy managing this internal conflict, just trying to bridge the gap between our hidden desires and the real world. Let me emphasize exactly why this matters and how we understand human psychology. The text explicitly states that if we fail in this struggle, if there is an unsuccessful resolution of these deep emotional conflicts, it literally results in abnormal behavior. When those repressed impulses build up and they can't find a socially acceptable outlet, or when the effort to keep them hidden just becomes way too much, that psychological pressure has to go somewhere. It manifests outwardly, and this right here is the absolute root of the clinical issues addressed in this framework. Which leads us to a pretty critical, almost suspenseful question. If the unconscious is the source of all this conflict, and it's defined as mental activity that we are entirely unaware of, how do we access it? How on earth can a doctor, a therapist, or even you yourself look into a part of the mind that is, by definition, hidden from conscious sight? I mean, we can't exactly just ask a person what their unconscious desires are, right? because they don't know.
Well, the answer lies in the breadcrumbs. According to the text, everyday mishaps are actually direct, analyzable windows into our deepest, repressed materials. We're talking about things like unexplained forgetting, sudden mispronunciations, the specific jokes we find funny, and of course, the dreams we have at night. These are not just random errors. They are moments when the guard of the conscious mind slips just enough for a tiny piece of the unconscious to leak out. By carefully analyzing these specific clues, we actually find a way to approach the unconscious mind.
And to systematically analyze these clues, a therapeutic procedure called psychoanalysis comes into play. Now, I want you to think of psychoanalysis not just as some dry clinical term, but really as an active, deliberate therapeutic rescue mission. The expert uses the clues we just talked about, the dreams, the free associations, to dive down into that dark basement. The basic goal of psychoanalytic therapy is to locate these repressed unconscious materials, grab hold of them, and essentially drag them all the way up into the light of the conscious mind.
But why go through all this trouble, right? Why dig up things that were repressed for a reason? Well, because, as the text notes, there is immense value in bringing this hidden material into the light. The ultimate goal of all of this is to help people live in a much more self-aware and integrated manner. See, when those concealed wishes and psychological conflicts remain stuck in the unconscious, they kind of control you from the shadows, causing that abnormal behavior we talked about. But once you bring them up into conscious awareness, you finally understand them, you integrate them, you literally regain control over your own actions and emotions.
So it really all boils down to this. The unconscious is a reservoir of instinctive or animal drives. We are not just completely rational beings operating purely on logic and conscious thought. We are deeply, deeply influenced by wild, untamed forces operating just below the surface of our awareness. And recognizing that this reservoir actually exists, that is the very first step toward true self-understanding.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final, kind of provocative thought. Armed with this brand new understanding of the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious mind, I want you to take a closer look at your own daily life. The next time you forget a name you absolutely should know, or you make a strange mispronunciation, or you wake up from an utterly bizarre dream, pause for a second and ask yourself, what is your unconscious trying to tell you today? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the hidden mind. Stay focused, keep learning, and I'll see you on the next explainer.